I'm going to talk about how students can learn a new topic. Now, literally just going to dive right in. I think this is a really interesting one because we obviously we have a lot of focus on students passing the exams, but we get lost around what are the things that students need to do to pass their exams. We might talk about revising, focusing, that kind of thing, but we forget that there's really a pathway, there's really a step-by-step pathway that students need to take to actually get that end goal. Now, one of the key things at the start of that pathway is learning a new concept or a new topic, right? Because you need to learn the topic. You need to be able to understand the topic, have it in your memory, be able to apply it so that when it comes to exams, when it comes to the end of that pathway, you can now use it, and not just use it, but use it properly, use it in a way that it's going to help you get the results. It's going to help the students get the results. So imagine if that, because that's at the start of the pathway. So imagine if the student failed on that, then they're not going to do well. They're not going to achieve that goals that they want in the exams. Because if you're failing at the start of that line, then it's going to make it harder to get to the end. So it's a very, very key skill that students need so that they can be comfortable that they've learned the right thing and be ready for their exams. So how are students learning, right? How are students learning information when they have a new topic? Well, that many students actually these days, for some reason, I find, in fact, I was speaking to a parent earlier on today, and she was saying to me that, my daughter just focus on, what they've been taught at school, but don't really put in time reading textbooks and that sort of thing. So actually many students don't even do that. But then you have the students that do maybe read the textbooks, they make some notes, they maybe do some flashcards, and that's generally about it in terms of their revision, right? Or in terms of their learning, not even just revision, but just basically grasping and learning a new concept. Maybe they might watch a YouTube video or something. Now, based on what I've said, you might have picked up that this is quite vague, isn't it? There's no direction, right? So this process of learning, it's not really a process. It doesn't really work, right? Let me just quickly share this with you. So it doesn't really work because it's just something that's vague. They have gone in without no direction. They haven't stopped to think about the goal. What am I going to get out of this, right? Or what am I going to put in an accomplishment? What am I going to get out of this? And so for that reason, many students don't do well at this point, right? They have that barrier at this point. Okay, so we know then that, okay, this doesn't work. So what should students do then? Well, as I sat down and I was thinking about it, I came up with a 5-step process that students can follow to learn a specific topic, right? So that they are confident in what they've learned, so that they come out of their learning session knowing they've learned the right thing, they've got the right information, and they're now going to use that to achieve their goals. So the first one is to start with a time frame. Having a time frame just really helps with focus. And I don't normally give a specific time, but I tend to say that no more than 15 minutes because the brain needs a break, right? Now, what I find is different students are different. Some students can work for 20 minutes and that's enough for them, and they might need a 30 minutes break. Others can work for 50 minutes, right? So whatever the students find comfortable with, whatever the student find is comfortable for them, and this can be a trial and error process, right? Whatever the student is comfortable with, they can start with that, right? So you can say, okay, I am going to take 20 minutes today to work on this topic that I need to, right? So if you have different subjects, and you decide, okay, I'm going to focus on 2 subjects on Tuesday evening or whatever, then 20 minutes each on those subjects. Because you have a time frame, that's going to link to a specific achievement, right? It's going to help you to say, well, I have 20 minutes, so I'm really going to put my head down, I'm going to focus, and I'm going to achieve this in 20 minutes. It's also very, very good for time management skills. So it's a way to start working with time management so that when the students go beyond GCSE, then they've already started to develop the time management skills. They already got quite good time management skill. The second thing after setting up a time frame is now having a goal, right? Because if you have a goal, you have something to shoot for. That gives you the direction that I was talking about that I said is missing, right? And when it comes to students learning, the goal is really the outcome, the what are they going to get out of that learning, right? And that outcome is going to be linked with the specification. Now, when I was at school, I just opened up books. I used to like reading a lot of books for some weird reason, but I would just open up books. Okay, I'll learn a little bit at school. If I didn't understand, when I went home, I would get a chemistry book, a biology book, or whatever, and I'll read it. But I didn't have any process. It was just, let's open up to the heart and read about the heart, right? And learn whatever I can about the heart. But there's a problem with that because I don't know what the specific goal is. So specifically, what about the heart do I need to learn, right? What is in my specification? What is in my curriculum, my syllabus that I need to learn, right? That's what students need to do. Now, you can get those learning outcomes obviously by going to the exam board, by speaking to the teacher. A very good and easy way to do it is to just use your learning outcomes from the book. So this one is from the AQA book. It's actually got learning objectives. This is about it. This is an AQA book, so it's, I would say, at least 90% linked with the actual specification, right? And you can literally just get the information from there. If it's different book, Edexcel, OCR, Edexcel, theirs isn't written as learning objective, it's written as some fancy name, but it's still the same thing. It's still the goal, the outcome that you want to achieve. So yeah, with number 2, what I suggest then is that students, linking back to that time frame, say, well, I am going to learn this in 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, I think I can learn, first bullet point, how to define an element. Second bullet point, that each type of atom has a chemical symbol, and you're done. So imagine that then, when you do that and you come out of your listening session and you go, tick, tick, yes, I've learned that. I've actually learned that. You feel confident, don't you? You feel like you are on the right path, or that you are actually on the right path. So it's really, really essential that students have a goal. And that's, one problem that students have is they don't go in with that goal. And obviously, if you're somebody that learn a little bit slower, you can still say, well, in 20 minutes, I'm going to learn one thing. It doesn't matter. If you're using a longer time period, 50 minutes, you can say in 50 minutes, I'm going to learn 3 things. Maybe Maybe 3 things I would say at a push, actually. Depends on how tiny they are. You don't want to be doing too much. You want to do something that's small enough that you can remember it. Once they have their goal, the third thing then is for students to now use the appropriate resource. An appropriate resource to me just means, what do students like to use to learn? What do they find, what works for them, right? Some students, like me, when I was back at school, having a big textbook worked for them, just opening it and read it. Other students, the nice, lovely condensed revision textbooks work for them. Other students, watching a video work for them. Other students, listening to audio. There's a lot of audios out there these days where you can just go in and say, and you can sort of look and say, okay, I just want to learn about the atom. Yeah. So yeah, once they've done that, the next thing is to now identify, okay, what is the appropriate, what is the resource that I want to use to get started with? Yeah, because once they've done that, now it's really time to jump in, start learning in a way that's going to help them retain that information. Go. Okay, so number 4, after they've got the appropriate resource, is now to learn the right way, to learn actively, right? And I'm sure many people have heard this word, learning active, because that's scientifically been proven. It's really going to be helpful for retaining information. But in the short form, learning active is really just having the learner, whoever's learning, the student, or whoever, in this case, students, the child, get involved in the learning, right? So that it goes, by doing that, it goes into the long-term memory. And in its kind of simplest term, learning actively is quite simple, but students don't like it because that getting involved can make them vulnerable. It can make them uncomfortable. It can mean my answer is not going to be right, right? They don't like that, right? But that's what we need to push them to do. So now, in today's day and age, there's a lot of distractions out there. There are the fancy, colorful flashcards. There are the lovely neon, beautiful sets of highlighters. So many different things, so many stationaries and different, and, brand new, beautiful revision books. And I have, worked with students. I've been to their home, where I was tutoring in homes in the past. They've been to mine where, I've been tutoring, and they're quite excited. They've got their brand new revision books. They've got their highlighters, their flashcards, and it's all well-meaning because they're doing it because they want the best for themselves. But many times it's actually a distraction, because sometimes the best things that work are actually the old things. As I'm saying this, it kind of reminds me of, like I don't know if any of you know where you've had like an old television that your granddad had or something, or your dad, and it still works. It's been there for years, but then you bought like a brand new television 5 years ago and it stopped working. Sometimes the older things, even like my laptop, I have like a very, very old Lenovo laptop. So I'm getting distracted, but I'll get back to the point. I have a very, very old Lenovo laptop that whenever this laptop breaks down, I go back and use that. It's still solid. It still works. It's great. But anyway, the reason for saying that is that back into learning, this is one of the things where the old method works. So not the fancy highlighters, the fancy mind maps, the fancy everything. Sometimes just going back to the old method and just read, recite, review. You can see it on the left, or sometimes it's called read, cover, recite. And all that means is, I put this screenshot back here again. when a student reads something, just go back and, or walk away from it, should I say, and recite it. They should recite it to themselves. Okay, I've learned about atom, and atom is blah, 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 blah. Okay. Or they can write it down. So recite it by writing it down, because when they do that, then their brain's now going to instantly say, well, they'll then go and review, and the brain instantly say, oh yeah, that's the bit that I missed. I know I missed a bit, or knew I was, I was a bit wrong with that one. That's what I need to focus on. And scientific studies actually show that in terms of learning, where you mess up, that's the best way to learn. That's where you're actually going to remember things more. So yes, there might be that uncomfortability. Is that English? Yes, they might be a bit uncomfortable in terms of reciting the information because they're worried that they might be wrong. But then once they go and check it, then that's actually going to help them. It's kind of like the child who learns by touching the heater, a hot heater, a hot radiator, and realizes, okay, I'm not going to go near that radiator again. It's the same thing with learning. So that, going back to that simple, just read, cover, recite, read, recite, review. All you need is a simple pen and paper. All they need is a pen. And that's really going to do a fantastic job in terms of their learning, their memory retention. And finally, apply knowledge. This is key, because I cannot tell you the amount of students that I work with that, yeah, answer questions in the sessions, appear to have a good understanding, but they don't actually apply their knowledge, right? And it's only when they go to apply their knowledge, they realize, I didn't understand that as well, or I'm not writing that clearly, right? Because you need to understand something quite clearly for you to apply it. So in terms of applying knowledge, then just any kind of practice questions, summary questions, revision questions, of course, exam papers, working on exam papers is going to be really, really helpful. So you can see there that there is a process to learning a new topic, right? To understanding something, not just going into it a bit blind. And we all do that. We all do that when we are quite stressed. I do that when I'm stressed, I'm under pressure. I don't do the things that I'm supposed to do. I don't take the 5 minutes out to plan. I just go in and get more overwhelmed. So not doing that, but actually having that plan. So starting with a time frame, linking that time frame to a goal. So in 20 minutes, I'm going to learn AB, or in 50 minutes, I'm going to learn ABC. Using the resource that works for the child. Then learning actively, so learning in the way where they retain the information, and then finally applying that knowledge. Okay. Okay, guys, I think that is it for today. I really do hope that helps. I know that with now being the summer, it's now been the summer, but summer holidays around the corner. Now it's kind of a good time to kind of take a step back and think about our techniques in terms of learning, so that when we do go back in September, we're right on top.